right, so we're back with the We Got Issues Hoodlum podcast. And listen, you guys like, subscribe, and
hit the like button
and follow us. Don't make it fun. Like, follow, and subscribe. Hit that button on the right there that says you liked it, like the podcast. You know, make us happy. You know what I'm saying? Catch you right back.
Run that.
Run that.
Run that.
So today we're just going to get to know each other. I'm going to give you a little background on me, how I got into the entertainment industry. I started out as a club promoter, ironically. But I started out as a club promoter when I was 16 years old. And I was promoting nightclubs all throughout the San Fernando Valley, Malibu, Ventura counties. And one thing led to another. My clubs became the go-to spots during the late 80s. And they ended up working at the Hollywood Palladium for a couple of guys, Greg and Philippe. And they used to have clubs. They had Paradise 24, which was also in LA. And they were just opening up their new club, and they came to one of my spots. It was called Montego, and it was packed. And they walked in on my night, and they said, "Hey, man, what are you doing on Saturdays?" And I said, "You know, I'm doing parties and stuff like that, but on Saturdays I got a couple of clubs going." They said, "Would you want to come down and bring your crowd to our club?" And I said, "Well, what kind of deal are we talking about?" And we worked it out. And I remember the first night, it was just pandemonium. I mean, I had been doing nightclubs where there was, 300, 500, 700 people a night. We do major events, renting out ballrooms and so forth for Halloween and Christmas and New Year's and so forth, Valentine's. But the Palladium was 3,000 people. And I remember our first night, we had about 2,000, 2,500 people, and it was just incredible. Every major celebrity in town, especially, it was a majority black audience. I would say 95%. And everybody from Arsenio Hall to Magic Johnson was frequently at the club, Mike Tyson, all the rappers, Heavy D, Ice, Queen Latifah, etc. Every single night, every single Saturday night, it was just packed with celebrities. I remember the guest list of the club, just celebrities alone, was between 50 and 100 people every night. So you never knew who you were going to get in there. Could be Madonna one night. She came by the way. But I ran the front door. And it was a very unique experience for me because here I am, I'm running the front door of the hottest club in LA, and it was all black. And the best part about it was it was just about the time that hip-hop was really emerging, especially in Los Angeles. New York was kicking off, and I was a big hip-hop head already. But it really started kicking off in the late 80s. And, NWA was popping off. And there were artists that were, Ice-T was popping off. Obviously Heavy D, et cetera, et cetera. But our club was a fusion of dance, R&B, and hip-hop. And we had bands performing there. In Vogue was performing. We had Run DMC perform at the club. Janet Jackson, Paula Abdul, whatever was hot after 7, whatever was hot at the time, they were performing at our club. And I got the bug, man. I got approached by a couple people, and they were like, "Man, you should get in the entertainment industry." And I had just been interviewing with talent agents, and I took a job at a talent agency, United Talent. It was called Bauer Benedek at the beginning, before it became UTA, the powerhouse that it is now. And I worked there in the mailroom. And I was in a training program just like everybody else, and working 60 hours a week, $350 a week. I took taxes out of that, insurance and all that stuff. But I paid my dues. And I was getting up every morning. I was driving in from Westlake Village and going to work in Beverly Hills every day. And I fucking loved it. It was crazy in the mailroom, but there was a bunch of us, and a lot of the guys in the mailroom had been just graduated law school, and they wanted to be agents or producers, directors, whatever. So it was a great stomping ground. It was a great experience. Got to work with some unbelievable, talented people. And I liked it. And I was there for about almost a year, I would say. And one night, I was at the Palladium, at the front door of the Palladium, and I meet this guy. And he comes in, and he's really cool, but he was too young to get into the club. And I had figured out that I better learn quickly what to do when people were coming up to the club, because the guys that ran it, my bosses, they're very picky and selective of who they wanted in the club. And if you remember, in the late 80s, it was just the beginning of the gang wars. So we had to keep the element out. But it was too tough, because the element was our patrons. Those guys that were running different sets, whether it be Latinos or Asian, these guys all had money, and they all wanted a place to party. They wanted to let loose, and they came to the club. So I got to meet the head of this crew, the head of that crew. And this particular night, this kid walks in, and he has a leather jacket on and had all these patches on it. And I remember it vividly because I started questioning him about it. And he's like, "How do you know about this?" And I said, "Well, I know all these artists, Sherelle, SOS Band, Alexander O'Neill, the Wailers." And he says, "Well, that's my dad's company." And I said, "Oh, cool." And he's like, "Man, you should meet him. You should get in the music business, Ev." And I said, "Well, I don't really know that many people in the music business. I know a lot of the artists, but I really didn't have a leg up." So I went to this guy's office, also in Beverly Hills, and he was wearing a suit, and he wore a pair of shell tops, or he'd been wearing a tracksuit, actually. And I walked into his office, and he had pictures of all these incredible artists all over the place. And he goes, "I heard you're taking care of my son at the club." And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "I heard you're in the talent business." I said, "Yeah, I'm working for a talent agency." He says, why don't you get in the music business?" I said, "Well, I really don't know that many people." He said, "Well, my son said I should help you, so I'll write you a letter." I said, "Thank you, sir." That was it. And I remember walking out of his office, and there was a big flower arrangement on his assistant's desk. And I commented on it. And it said, "Happy Valentine's Day, love, Eric." And I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. Got a boyfriend, huh?" She goes, "Yeah, he's a rapper." And I'm like, "Oh, that's dope." So I leave, and I have this letter of recommendation. I take the letter of recommendation, I send it out to all these record labels. And there was only 8 majors at the time. And I sent it out, and I got 15 calls. I guess my resume was circulating around the other labels. And I remember walking in to A&M Records. And I had just did the Janet Jackson party. And I walked in, and the guy says, "So, you're going to start tomorrow?" And I said, "Excuse me?" He goes, "You're going to start tomorrow, right?" And I'm like, "Well, am I having an interview, or what am I going to do?" He said, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I am a promoter." He said, "What do you mean you promote?" I said, "Well, I'm a street promoter." He said, "What's street promoter?" And I said, "Well, it's kind of different. It's like guerrilla marketing tactics mixed with Sun Tzu art of war tactics. And I call it street teams." And he's like, "All right, so you got people out there?" He goes, "Well, I got the Goonies." You go, "Who are the Goonies?" I go, "The Goonies are a bunch of young kids." I throw them in the back of my car, and we go out and we bomb a whole area. He said, "Bomb a whole area?" And I go, "Yeah, I take flyers, stickers, whatever the fuck I got. And I put them under people's doors at their apartment complexes, or I go and I infiltrate other hot spots, go to hair salons, beauty parlors, barbershops, car shows, wherever music is being played, restaurants, and I hit them up with invitations." And he says, "I like that." And I go, "Yeah, if I'm having a party in Encino, I'll lock down Encino and I'll completely bomb Encino. I'll put posters on the walls. I'll put stuff up inside the restaurants, at the cool shoe stores, dress shops, wherever the chicks hang out, bikini stores. And I hit those places and I leave invitations, a stack of invitations on the counter. And I started doing that. And he goes, I like it, man. I like it. And he goes, you're going to start tomorrow. And I said, what's the job going to be? He's like, you're the new head of street teams. I'm like, like that? And he's all, just like that. I said, that's pretty cool. I go, can I ask you, what made you just give me that job like that? And he says, well, the guy that wrote you your letter is the same guy that wrote me my letter. And I said, what? And he's all, the guy that wrote you your letter, my friend, is the most powerful guy in the record business. I said, my friend's dad? And they go, yep, your friend's dad. Well, little background, the assistant girl at the office, her name was Tamika. Eric, the guy that gave her the flowers, was Eric Wright. Eric Wright was Eazy-E from NWA, and the man that wrote me my letter is known in the industry as the Black Godfather. His name is Clarence Avant. And Clarence Avant was my friend Eric introduced me to him, and Eric's friend was Alex. Alex Avant was Clarence's son, and Bucky. These guys were like a crew, and these guys were always talking about Alex this, Alex that, and it was just a chance meeting that Alex came to the club that night. And then I got to meet his sister Nicole, and a few years later Nicole ended up coming to work with us, and she was interning at our offices, and she's a very powerful woman these days. She worked for the Obama administration. She's a producer. She actually got married, and her husband is one of the heads of Netflix. But Nikki and Alex are just amazingly beautiful people, dear friends of mine. It's going on over 30 years now, and it was all thanks to their dad, who gave me a shot. And once I got into A&M, I used those same tactics of how I promote a nightclub, and I promote records. And I remember the first record I worked was Janet Jackson. And I worked the Janet Jackson record, worked the Rhythm Nation record, and one of the first club records I was working was CeCe Peniston. And I remember working CeCe, taking it to clubs everywhere, and I started going on the road. And the record was getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It's an iconic record now. But back then, she had one song. She had Finally. And Finally obviously went gold. It was my first gold record that I had. And then I started working with some hip-hop artists. And one of them was Tragedy. I took that record number one. And before you knew it, I had hot records from Trag, and then CeCe obviously had Keep On Walking. Trag had a song called Grand Groove, Street Life, bunch of great records. He went number one as well. And I was popping. I was popping all over the place. And I loved my days at A&M. It was my first foothold into the record business. I got appointed onto a board of strategic marketing with Leor Cohen and Russell. I got to meet one of my guys who was doing street team promotion for me, Kev. And Kev Lyles was, just an amazing guy. I was working out the Mid-Atlantic market at the time, but he started working with us, and before I knew it, I was like right in the mix. And this is like 90s, beginning of the 90s. Everything's starting to pop off. And I remember one time I was at the Gavin Convention in San Francisco, and I was with Tragedy, and all of a sudden this guy comes walking up, and he's wearing a military jacket. He got a camo flight jacket on and a camouflage hat. and I'm introduced to him, and he's also from Queens, and he's like, so my name is Nasty Nas. I'm all, Nasty Nas? He's like, yeah. I said, wait a second, weren't you on the Zebrahead soundtrack? And he's like, yeah. I go, that was my guy. My guy was, involved with that project. And I go, nice to meet you, man. And I remember hanging out with him. My girl, one of my girls, Taish Harris, who was working for Columbia at the time, she had Nasty Nas. Michael Barron, MC Search, he had signed him. And I remember meeting him. Of course, from the West Coast, I met Easy, of course, Dre. They were all coming to the clubs. Belle Biv DeVoe was coming to the clubs. Eddie Murphy, Arsenio. Anybody that was hot, Malcolm Jamal Warner, anybody that was hot at the time, early 90s, they were coming to the club. So now I'm working at the Palladium, I'm working at A&M, and I'm getting hot. People are taking notice. And I thought that if I went and did this in every single market around the country, I could really make a name for myself. So I started traveling. And I would meet up with like guys down south like Tony Draper, who had Suave House Records. I would meet up with the Rap-A-Lot guys. And, Jay Prince and his crew. And then I would meet up with the guys, the Uptown guys in New York and the Bronx and down in Brooklyn. They were all different crews. Washington, heading up to meet with Nasty Ness, and then bouncing down to D.C. with Ducky U, and going to Atlanta with Paris Johnson, and the Carolinas with A.J. Savage. These guys we were all just starting out. These guys are legends now. Ducky has one of the hottest sneaker shops in D.C. He works for every major label. Of course, Suave House blew up. The Cash Money guys blew up. But I was always going into the hood. And I was fearless. But I had backup. And I would go down there and I meet with the Disciples, and I meet with these guys, and I meet with those guys, and the gang members, or the Bloods, and the Crips, and the Latin Kings, and these guys were the pulse and the fabric of the streets. And being a white Jewish kid from New York, I grew up around all different races and all people, and I wasn't afraid to infiltrate markets that were different than my surroundings. And living in the suburbs and beach kid, it wasn't foreign to me. It wasn't foreign to me. And I got embraced by the community in a big way. Plus I got endorsed by the most powerful guy in urban music, Clarence Avant. But I remember, Mike Conception, who's legendary, one of the legendary Crips, and Tony Lane. These guys, they ran the hood. Stan Shepard, these guys ran the hood, all different markets. And it was awesome. And I remember one day I get a call from Virgin Records, and guy calls me up and says, can you come in for a meeting? And I said, sure. His name was Wayman Jones. He was the head of Black Music. And he said, Ev, I'm seeing what you're doing. You're really popping right now. I'd like to offer you a job to come over to Virgin. And I was flattered. I was being poached. And I go, what's going on? He goes, well, we have a new label we're going to start called Virgin Rap. And we want you to head it up. So they offered me this job, and I said, let me think about it over the weekend. And I remember on Saturday I was walking in the beach down in Malibu, and I ran into my old boss. Actually, he was my boss at the time still. His name was Al Cafaro. And Al used to love my dogs. I have my Rotties. And Al says to me, he says, Ev, come here, man. And I go walking up to the house, we get some iced tea, and we're hanging out. We take a nice walk on the beach down in the colony. And he says, Ev, the most important thing in this business is loyalty. Your word, that's it. Loyalty is the most important thing in the business. And I said, I know, that's the code. And he looks me dead in the eye and he goes, what's going on with Virgin? And I looked back at him and I was like, oh shit. Well, I just went for a meeting. They called me up and said, can you come down? He goes, no, I know what's going on. I go, how did you know? He goes, we know what's going on. I said, all right. He said, so what are you thinking about? And I said, well, maybe a nice offer. He said, forget about that offer. And he said, on Monday, you're going to walk into the office, you're going to go see Milt, and we're going to give you your own label. I said, excuse me? He said, we're going to give you your own label. You can sign 5 artists a year to start. We'll see how it goes. We're going to give you budgets of $100,000 an artist. We're going to give you a staff of 5. Marketing guy, sales guy, promotion guy, an assistant, and you're going to have your own label. So go home, think about it, think about the name you want to call it, because on Monday, you're going to be the president of a new label. And that's how it started. All right, so we're back with the We Got Issues Hoodlum podcast, and listen, you guys subscribe, and
Hit the like button.
And follow us. Don't make it fun. Like, follow, and subscribe. Hit that button on the right there that says you like the podcast. Make us happy. You know what I'm saying? Catch you right back.
Here we go.